Buenos dias, lectores. We are here and we are talking about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So, for this movie review, I just really wanted to get into some of the details. So, the first part is going to be no spoilers. Second part is going to have like more specifics on the things that I thought about. Um, I will say that this movie wasn't my favorite Hunger Games adaptation. I am wearing a little President Snow look, which is lame. I know. We're not standing President Snow, but it's way easier than doing a Lucy Gray look. I have my red lips for all the poisoning. I have a shirt that looks very much like his Reaping Day shirt, and we're going to get into it. Had to put my glasses on because, again, I can't see my notes. My notes are kind of all over the place because, again, I've only seen this once, but I did have really strong feelings about certain things. The biggest thing being the pacing of this movie. So, also, if you hear extra noise, they're blowing the leaves around my house, so sorry. I know my Hunger Games series hasn't come out yet. It's a really long video that I'm trying to condense more, and it's not working great for me. Like, I'm just talking so much, and I love the series so much. But the Hunger Games itself is like a 380-page book. This book was close to 600 pages. So when you think about like even the Mockingjay, which was like 390, that was split into two parts, there's really good pacing in the Hunger Games. It got to the point that I even looked up if the directors were the same. Same directors. I love the pacings of all the Hunger Games series books, but for some reason, this one was so off. Everything felt so sped up. Everything was just happening from the start. There was no build up. There was none of this like suspense that was so great in the original Hunger Games series. And honestly, it threw me off so bad. Suzanne Collins did a really good job of like slowly progressing into Snow's downfall. And with that, like there was still enough humanity to Snow that you could still connect to him as a character, but also very clear what his intentions were, especially with Lucy Gray. It was very clear that his intentions were to get some sort of footing with her as a Hunger Games character, and over time, or a Hunger Games tribute. And over time, he built a real connection with her that he did not expect. And so it plays into how their love, while it is trauma, it is also like real and there are some significant parts to it. And that wasn't really there in this movie. Like, I don't believe that they loved each other in this movie. I genuinely believe that they just had a trauma relationship. And again, it's not that you genuinely believe that they love each other in the book, but it's more believable for them to have like some sort of relationship and connection because things build gradually, whereas this was just like all at once. He showed up, he gave her a rose, she knew that she needed him to win, so she gave him some affection, and he decided that they were in love. Like, that's not what it was like in the book at all. And it honestly felt really disappointing that the build up wasn't as fluid. Other characters felt really disappointing as well. Like, Tigress is not really featured in this. And it's very weird because I think Tigress was the role that most people were looking forward to the most. You know, Tigress's backstory is very much played off in the Hunger Games series, but she becomes a more significant role in the end when Katniss ends up finding shelter with her as she's trying to get to Snow. But like to think about President Snow's cousin getting to that point, it has some buildup, right? Tigress is literally the reason that people don't know the Snow family is currently living in poverty. So for that to not play a larger role in the movie was almost like erasing her character again. Like she was very much just a visual character. It was just having Hunter there. I can never remember the actress's last name, but they're phenomenal. But having Hunter there, having another pretty face, and having someone who slightly pushes back against the oppression in the capital, like the idea that the districts are animals, having someone who doesn't fully believe in that. But other than that, there's not this huge significance. Like in the book, Tigress is extremely significant. She's actually one of the main reasons that the Snow family has survived as long as they survive. Like Corio or Coriolanus, President Snow, would have died. He would have died of starvation if it wasn't for the sacrifices that Tigress had made throughout the story. So to have her character reduced to such a minimal role felt really upsetting. And part of it is too with this story is that you can see that they film more than what we saw. Obviously, most movies do. Like they talked about with Harry Potter. All of the scenes in Harry Potter are technically filmed, we just haven't seen them. So to know that there is an existence of maybe some of these more significant scenes, I want to know why they were left on the cutting board. I will say that this was a very long movie. Like, it's 3 parts, it's a very long book. Like we said, it's almost 600 pages compared to the other Hunger Games books, which are close to 3 to 400. So it's a lot to show in a really short amount of time. A lot of the book is completely narrative in Snow's head. So again, we don't see things that are outside of him. And I know that in a movie, they can't like show you the thought process in their head. They have to act that out. It's like showing, not telling. Whereas in the book, we get more telling. But I think they could have gone more in depth with certain things. Even the entire premise of how Lucy Gray wins the Hunger Games is completely changed. I can't understand the significance of doing that in a movie. I don't understand why the director was like, we're going to deeply change certain characters and their significance in this movie and downplay them. Um, the way that certain things are done in the Hunger Games. Like in the Hunger Games, certain characters are pulled back and put out forth differently, but they're not like main core characters. To me, Tigress is a main core character. Snow is a main core character. And the one that actually really bugged me is Dean Highbottom is a main core character. So, and Sejanus Plinth. So, Dean Highbottom in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is the person who runs the academy where all capital children go. Um, and has it out for Snow pretty bad and has really significant reasons to have it out for Snow. But in this, they kind of put him as this martyr for the district children, and he is not that. Like, he is still a capital citizen. He is addicted to morphine. He is not as oppressive, I guess, as some other capital citizens, but he does still see himself as above district children. Like, he is really coined for starting the Hunger Games. Like, that's not really a spoiler. That's something that's brought up pretty quickly in both the book and the movie. And no, he is not someone who supports the Hunger Games. Like, he actually very much thinks they should stop, as most capital citizens do. Like, the capital is not enjoying the Hunger Games. That's why the entire premise of the book and the movie is, how do we remarket the Hunger Games so that more people watch them, so that more people care to stay and see them. But he is not this good person the way that they portray him here. They portray him as though he has been constantly rebelling or fighting against the capital decision of the Hunger Games, like really gun-ho, really advocating in these ways while still trying to be subtle, because he understands that going against what the capital says is a form of rebellion. But it's really not like that in the story. He's kind of just like wallowing and like has it out for Snow for, again, reasons I will get into in the spoiler part of the review. But he's not this holier than thou, happy to send Lucy Gray back to District 12 with pride. Like, that's not him. He's not Haymitch. That's honestly what it feels like. It feels like they depicted him as Haymitch, who is another person who uses substances to cope with the games, and that he really just wants people to survive. He really just wants things to change, and he's struggling. That's not Dean Highbottom. At least that's not Dean Highbottom in the book. So to put him in that like martyr position is a completely rebranding of his character that I just disagree with so wholeheartedly. It felt really destructive. Another character that doesn't feel the same way they do in the book. Actually, I take that back. I don't know if it's that he doesn't feel the same way he does in the book, or his relationship to Snow doesn't feel the same way it does in the book. It's Sejanus Plinth. So Sejanus Plinth, again, if you haven't read the book, this is a little da-da-da, but it's very clear in the movie, is A child whose father, during the rebellion, they were growing up in District 2, his father gave up secrets that allowed the capital to win. So they have secured themselves a place in the capital because of his father's betrayal of the districts. But at the end of the day, Sejanus grew up a district kid. So he personally does not see nor agree with what is going on, especially the Hunger Games. Sejanus and Snow build a real relationship despite their differences of opinions and despite their differences of views. In this one, I will say it looks like Snow purely builds a relationship with Sejanus for his own benefit. And while to a point that is true in the story, that is not all true in the books. Like, they do have a real friendship and relationship that forms from, again, trauma, chaos, rejection, poverty, the main themes of this book. So for that to be erased and kind of seen as like, oh no, Sejanus only cares about this and Snow only cares because his dad has money, not true. That's not true in the story. It is partially true, but it's not the entire all encompassing of their friendship and their relationship in any way. And it even gets to the point where when we talk about things that happen to Sejanus, it feels inauthentic, Snow's reaction, based off of how the movie portrayed their relationship. Whereas in the story, his reaction to things happening with Sejanus feel very real and very visceral and like a conflict of being within Snow. It does not feel like a conflict of being in this. It feels like, I don't know, just fake. It feels very fake in this movie. I will say, overall in the movie, everybody's acting was great. Everybody did a great job. Oh my gosh, the soundtrack to this movie is phenomenal. Like, my mom, who is so not tech savvy and so does not like the Hunger Games, mainly because the idea of like children fighting each other is awful to her. Like, she's never been able to get into it. Was obsessed with the soundtrack. The first thing she asked me was, can you download this soundtrack on my phone? The music was beautiful. The music is such a significant part of the book. So it felt really, really good to have that continue, to have that flow. And when there were moments of pause and moments of real development, it was always when the songs were going. That was the only time this movie slowed down. Otherwise, honestly, this movie just felt like it was spitting information at you and spitting scenes at you. Honestly, like, in the Hunger Games series, its biggest strength is its silence. I've listened to a few movie commentaries by actual sound technicians and animators and film creators where they talk about the silent moments in the Hunger Games are like unheard of in other films. You always want a soundtrack, you always want a backtrack. And so for them to choose silence and just the sound of bombings or killings or explosions in so much of it actually forces you as a viewer to pause and hear everything. And that's honestly what these movies were missing so much of, but they found it with the characters' music. Like, anytime Lucy Gray sings, there is silence. You know, it's the first time that the capital stops moving. It's the first time people stop and listen. It's honestly kind of the only times that we even get real deepness from Snow. So it's nice that some of those moments did exist, but there should be way more of them with the context of this and the original book. All right, y'all, this is the end to the no spoiler part of the review. If you would like spoilers, keep watching. If not, skip to this time on the screen. I don't know where it is, to be honest. It'll be somewhere, to get the final review and how we feel about it. All right, y'all. I'm unbuttoning one button. It's choking me out. Look at that. Nice and loose. Snow would never be. I also should have like a little flower or something here, but I'm not doing it. We're not chilling with the enemy. All right. So let's get into like real moments and real characters. I'm going to start with part one. Honestly, I kind of just sat down and started filming this. I probably should have structured this a little more, but we're just going to do like a little flow of thought. I do have some notes on the side over here at the screen, so if you see me reading, that's just why. But yeah, let's get into it. All right, so part one is the tributes. Um, the scenes were really, really quick. The reaping scene itself in the book gave a lot of leeway and opening into some of what was going on with Snow. We don't have that at all here. So Snow is living in poverty. Like we get a really great opening scene where Snow is trying to survive with Tigress, where they're on the street and where they're hiding from people who are literally hacking other people's like frozen bodies to eat. You know, they're starving. So they're like, you know, that person's dead in the street. I gotta go cut their leg off and eat them. Otherwise, I'm not gonna survive. Tigress legit has to fight off a rabid dog to get them food from the trash, which is a great callback because um, those of you who have read the book know that. Oh my gosh, what's his called? I almost called him Plinth. Jessup, who is the other tribute from District 12, dies from rabies in the game. And so it's a great lead up to seeing what that looks like, especially if you haven't read the book, because the rabid dog displays the exact same symptoms and images that Jessup displays later, which comparing Jessup to a dog is not what I'm trying to do, but you know what I mean? Like, we get that imagery repeated and it shows the real issue with it, which in the books they talk about how rabies went rampant during the war because there was no access to vaccines and there was no access to this. So when people were eating animals that had died in the street, a lot of those animals were infected with rabies, and therefore people in the capital had begun getting infected with rabies as well. But it was a really good callback, a really good scene, and it kind of shows Tigress as this older cousin. We also get the introduction to President Snow's father, who was a war general who died in District 12 during the rebellion. Um, he was mainly working in District 13. That's where the Snows got their money. And so when District 13 was destroyed, the Snows' entire wealth was destroyed with it. We also see their apartment, which has become kind of decrepit, which is interesting because in the book, things were run down, but they still had some fine things because they refused to sell off their stuff to make it obvious. So I think they could balance that out with like the extreme poverty of them not having clothing, them not having heat, floorboards being ripped up, while also still showing some of the extravagance of what the snow home was before. There's none of that. It's just the pure poverty of it, which is totally fine. There's nothing really off about that. But one thing that they do really focus on is that the snow home has rat poison everywhere, which I don't love. So the rat poison is super significant, but it comes from the zoo where the tributes are held, and it's only placed there because tributes are getting bit and dying off from the diseases. So it again kind of takes away that element of like the brutality of the capital with the games so far, and the fact that tributes don't usually stay in the capital. You know, they literally are taken from their homes and put in the games immediately. It's not usually this big spectacle the way it is with Katniss, the way it is now, because they're trying to draw out the games, because they're trying to draw out viewership, where now they need to house and feed these district children, whereas before they've never done that. So it kind of shows that the capital is more prepared than it is for this excursion that they are trying to complete. With that, we get an introduction to all of our mentors. All of our mentors are capital children. And again, that is deeply significant in the book. It's kind of brushed off in this. Like, if the capital children don't really care, they don't really have any business in it. The capital children are the same age as most of the district children at this time. They have gone through the war together in similar ways. Um, and so it's actually very painful for the capital children to see and meet their districts. You know, some of them are very, like, those of them who haven't really suffered during the war, who still have their wealth, don't really see it that way. But then there's like Coriolanus, there's Clemmy, there's, I can't remember the name of the mentor who has the other District 12 tribute, but there's some of them that are really working together because they do very much want their district competitor to survive because they see themselves in them. They have gone through that level of starvation at this point. They have lost parents, they have lost family members. They become more on the side of why are we continuing the Hunger Games? once they are mentors and go through the trauma of trying to prepare their tributes for death. And it's a very eye-opening experience for many of them who had always seen the tributes as different from them, and it's their first time seeing them as equals and as people. So I think there's really a downside to them not showing more of like the class work that they have associated with the Hunger Games, not showing more of the time in which they are being taught, in which Dr. Gall is coming in and is expecting these things of them. Even Clemmy's snake bite was like lame. I don't know. There's so much to that in the book where Clemmy's going through like disfiguration and pain and screaming, and it's Snow's first realization that the capital will even give up its own citizens to pertain an image, and it's part of the reason he starts to fall in love with Lucy Gray, right? He realizes that he is no district, that he too different, that he too is a pawn in the capital's game if the capital is willing to sacrifice its own citizens and hurt its own citizens just for lying. You know, they've been taught to lie. They've been taught to lean on each other and manipulate work to do better, to help their friends, to help each other. So this is the first time that they get directly punished for doing that. And it's a much bigger deal in the book, which again, I understand they don't have the same pages, but that's the issue with the pacing of this story. Nothing is significant. Everything just happens and it's done. It happens and it's done. It happens and it's done. Like, Snow didn't used to poison people. But when he realizes that Lucy Gray may be dying, again, because Jessup gets bit by a rat in the zoo, in like the monkey zoo where they're kept, which is again deeply significant to keep children in a monkey area. You know, again, those tiebacks to historical context, to what that is insinuating, to putting them side by side with animals is really important, and they gloss over it like it's nothing. It's so important that the other capital citizens even realize what the insinuation is and understand that it's a show. Because again, the capital has never held these children. It's always been the reaping, the arena, you're dead. That's it. All in like a 1 day, 2 day period. So for them to draw it out this long, a lot more of these subtleties are coming out and are being connected. It was just rushed. It was very rushed, and it made nothing really matter because there's no build up, there's no fear. Snow doesn't even look like phased by most of what's happening until he gets hurt in the rebel bombing. And that's it. Really, that's the only time he seems genuinely in distress. Every other time just seems kind of like dramatized. Like, the actor does a good job of showing the distress, but it doesn't feel real because we haven't had these big character connections. We haven't had these big relationship building moments for it to make sense. You know, we even missed the point where they get to interview the tributes, which is huge in the Hunger Games series. Like, them interviewing the tributes is a big deal, and it's because it connects you as an audience to the characters. That being said, one character specifically that has changed a ton, who's not a very significant character, is Reaper, the male tribute from District 11. And I have a theory as to why. I don't know if this is true, but like, let me know if you agree with me. So, District 11 has been established as Rue's district, right? The majority of people from Rue's district in the Hunger Games series were portrayed, not in the books, but in the TV movie adaptation, have been portrayed as black. So in this reaping, both of the tributes from District 11 were black, which I don't remember if they were in the story. But not like light-skinned black, like dark-skinned black characters. With that being said, Reaper was kind of like Kato in the Hunger Games series. You know, it's not that he was murderous for the sake of being murderous to the level that Kato was, but he was like, if I'm going to do this, number one, I'm going to win. And then number two, I'm going to do things that like piss off the capital while I win. So I am going to play into their game, but I am going to still have this rebellious side. He was all rebel in this one. They took out any moments that he kills anyone. I don't think Reaper kills anyone in the games. He spends his whole time just trying to protect his other partner from District 11 who's dying from tuberculosis, who I believe dies before the games even start. A lot of characters die before the games even start in this one. I think like 4 tributes are down before the games even start in the book. That doesn't happen in this one. They like shoot one person for killing their mentor who was teasing them while they were starving with food. And that's it. Whereas in the original one, I believe, I take that back actually, 2 of them were shot in the rebellion too, trying to escape. But in the original one, the Capitol is brutal to these kids. Like literally strings them up, parades their dead bodies around as they tried rebellious acts before the games. So we're going to punish them publicly, and we're going to have this whole funeral for the fallen mentor who everybody hated anyway. And we're going to string up their dead bodies for contributing to it, for contributing to the rebellion, whatever, whatever. But Reaper says, I'm going to kill you all. I'll kill you nicely, but I'm going to kill you all. Like, I'll kill you quickly. That's how he kind of poses it. I'm going to win and I'm going to go home, but I'm going to kill you all quickly. I think because District 11 has been like kind of posed as the black district, specifically with dark skinned black children, they wiped that whole storyline because Reaper is literally refuses to kill anybody, buries the other tributes, and gives them a proper funeral, which does happen in the book. He does like tear down the Capitol flag and give them a proper like burial to say that we too are Capitol citizens, like we are citizens of Panem, so we too deserve the same level of honor as all Capitol citizens do in our death. But that was his entire storyline for this. He's not fighting anyone, even though he's one of the biggest, even though he's one of the strongest. He's not going to kill anybody for the sake of the Capitol. And that is very different from his book character. And I think it is to not pose him as a violent black man, which I can't say that it really damaged anything, but it is very, very different from his book character, I will say. And it wasn't really anything negative in the story. It was actually kind of this cool act of resistance that was appreciated. That being said, another thing that I want to get into that I did discuss during my Hunger Games one, I know it didn't come out yet, so for me to be talking about it is kind of like, bleh. But was the inclusion of differently abled characters or characters with different abilities. So in this one, we do have one of the tributes has Down syndrome, another tribute has lost use of their eye, another one has lost one of their arms, and they show these characters with different abilities in the Hunger Games, which makes sense. We talked about it, and we even talk about it in the Capitol. People have different abilities just naturally in society, but also after a war, when a war was brought to your district, to your location, it makes sense for children and for people and citizens to be different, to look different, to have different needs and different ways of moving and functioning. In the original Hunger Games series, PETA has to amputate his leg. He literally is supposed to have a prosthetic leg. And they don't show it at all in the movies. They completely erase that storyline. They completely erase Katniss's storyline of her eardrum being ruptured and her needing a hearing aid. And it makes sense to have that inclusion in those stories. So it was so, so cool to see that. I will say I was very happy that the deaths were not bloody and were not graphic. That was something I was very worried about this, but especially when you have like such a small children in this, especially the small child who was the Down syndrome character, and she's just begging to be let out of the games. Your heart is like dying. Like even the other tributes' hearts were dying when she's begging for this to be over, for her to get to go home, when she's begging for her mother. And I was like, I cannot see her die. I'm gonna let you know right now, I don't want to see it, and they did it in a very covert way that I do deeply appreciate, especially with how graphic movies are nowadays and how it's like nobody's protected, nobody's safe from that level of graphic content. I just couldn't take it, and I'm very happy that they didn't show it because I just would have been devastated. All right, let's go on to the games themselves because I'm actually kind of already in that. Um, Things were similar. There were differences in like the career pact, There were differences in who died and how they died, which I felt was interesting, but that also happened in the original Hunger Game adaptations of the movies. So I can't say that I was necessarily surprised, but some of that was just to change up the storyline. Jessup's death still made me so sad. Oh my gosh. Like him dying from rabies and the way that he died. But I do wish that they again showed more of the exposition with the mentors, because it plays into who was supportive of the games, who wasn't. Most of the mentors are not supported by the games by the end of it. And it plays into this truth that this level of trauma is really unnecessary, and even capital citizens don't agree with it. But then it also plays into how did you create it into like a sporting event. Like when we think of MMA is so bloody, is so painful. You see people's bones get broken in MMA, but we still watch it. You know, we love that in America. We watch these things and we watch these like epic, it's like gladiator battles. And so turning it from this trauma of the war into like a gladiator battle is very significant in this story and making it entertainment. But I don't think this movie did a great job of showing how that transformation happened. And even Dr. Gall in the end became like, I'm just gonna kill everyone. There's not gonna be a victor. What are you talking about? That does not happen in the book. There literally has to be a victor. That is the whole point of this. So having that ending where she's like, I'm just gonna kill all the tributes because the rebels did X, Y, and Z doesn't make sense. It was actually a very odd change. It was kind of trying to bring out the humanity that people feel for Lucy Gray Byard, because one of the big tropes that Snow plays into is that Lucy Gray is a covey, which was like a traveling music band before the districts were cut off, and does not belong to any one district. So he plays into that to say that she is more of a capital citizen than she really is a District 12 citizen. And it's kind of how he rebrands her. And so at the end, when Lucy Gray is singing to survive the snakes, if you know, you know the real reason she survives the snakes. But I think it was a way for them to show that the Capitol sees her as different and wants her to win, but they've always intended to have a victor. You know, they were never going to kill all of them. They said if it happened, it happened. Like, whatever. They didn't really care that much. But they were always planning for there to be a victor. So I don't understand that change and getting the capital citizens to rile up against Gaul for Lucy Gray to win. Like, if that was the case and if that was how it was going to happen, the Gaul would have lost her position of power. You know, like the capital no longer trusts you. They don't like how you're running things. It just didn't work for me. It was a change that maybe if I was a viewer who hadn't read the book, it wouldn't have bothered me. It would have felt like this like heroic moment where Lucy Gray breaks through to the capital citizens and breaks through oppression and it finally happened. But as someone who read the book, it made no sense. And as someone who knows the previous Hunger Games series, it makes no sense. Like they constantly talk about why there's a victor. It comes up in the first Hunger Games movie. Why wouldn't we just round them all up and shoot them up? If that's what we were going to do, we've already won. We already have the power to do that. It's that the victor provides hope, and giving the right amount of hope is important. And that is also very clear in the foundation of the Hunger Games, which was written by Dean Highbottom as a joke and as a drink, which is what we'll get into in the wedding. So obviously, Lucy Gray wins. If you don't know that by now, you haven't been paying attention to the Hunger Games series. Like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. That's not even a spoiler. And with that, she is checked, and it is found that she has the little vial of rat poison, which is Snow's mother's. It's a very important compact. It smells like roses. It's what he uses for comfort, and it is how he gets Lucy Gray to win. But he doesn't give it to her with rat poison. He gives it to her empty, and she puts rat poison into it from the zoo. Right? Okay. She also poisons Reaper, which is how she wins. She poisons some of the career packs. I believe, or she just leaves a bottle of water out with it, and I can't remember who dies from it. So she kills two people in the Hunger Games that way. And I mean, I don't know if you would count Jessup as one of her kills, but I wouldn't. Because he does die from the drone, and it takes multiple drones actually to get him away from Lucy Gray. With that being said, she is searched. After she is searched and they find out that Snow cheated, they do send her back. Dean Highbottom doesn't send her back with this, like, love and care and da 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 da. Like, it doesn't happen. So I don't know why they wrote that in. Because again, Dean Highbottom doesn't like the Hunger Games, but he doesn't care that way. Like, he just is himself in his own little corner, wallowing in life. Um, and then they call Snow in to talk about how he cheated. That's kind of when it's all unveiled that the reason that Dean Highbottom has it out for Snow is that Snow's father took this thing that was a joke and drinks between friends and turned it into the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games was never supposed to happen. This assignment was never supposed to be given to anybody, but he knew that it would launch him into a deeper power. So he gave it to officials, he gave it to Gaul, and that's why the Hunger Games are what they are. So that legacy is very important. That is a legacy that is drawn out like all the way to the end, I think. I don't remember it being that long in the book. But Dean Highbottom just like lets it rip and doesn't make a lot of sense in this. He's just too sympathetic of a character. I don't believe it. And again, if I was a viewer who didn't read the books, would I like Dean Highbottom as a character? I love Peter Dinklage as an actor. He does a great job with the acting in this. It's just like you don't get his angle. You don't get where he's coming from for most of this. And he feels kind of like some throwaway character, I'm not going to lie. He doesn't really seem deeply significant in this the way that he does in the books as this like person who has a vendetta against the Snows. We go out to the districts, Sejanus comes with us because he feels brotherhood with Snow, which again is not properly established in this at all. Sejanus and Snow have real moments of reconciliation and care, but specifically, Sejanus' mom is kind of like feeding the Snows at this point. When she sees that Sejanus makes a friend, and like for a very long time, Snow does not want to be associated with Sejanus, she starts feeding their family, which is kind of how the Snows are surviving right now. And it's very helpful to them, and it's very helpful when Snow is sent away and, his grandma and Tigris are left struggling and all of that. And when he makes it to District 12, they go through training together, they find a real connection during training, even though Sejanus is still struggling with this idea of being a peacekeeper and still being an agent of the capital, because again, he grew up in the districts. He understands their plight. He understands what is going on, even if he didn't know it to this extent, being from District 2. Their relationship just feels more connected through boot camp, and even Snow says it like, this is my real brother. Snow doesn't have any siblings because his mother died during childbirth in the war, and he says Tigris is the closest he's had as a sister, but this is what it would be like to have a brother with Sejanus, and he does deeply feel that love and connection and protectiveness towards him. Like, he really does try to get him, how to keep him out of trouble. He supports him where he can. But in the movie, Sejanus is completely cut out of most things with Snow. Like, he goes to the lake with Snow and Lucy. He's a part of their family. Lucy Gray's family loves Sejanus. They feel very connected to him. All of that is cut out. It's like Sejanus doesn't even exist. He's just kind of there, kind of not. He's doing his own thing, and he's being a rebel, and Snow is trying not to associate with him. Not at all. Like, Snow was so on Sejanus, and I feel like that relationship was totally ruined in this, and it makes Sejanus' ultimate death completely null and void as well. I don't know why Snow's crying after Sejanus' death. He gave him up, and he gave him up because he felt that Sejanus was being a rebel, which does happen in the book as well, but he feels deep remorse for sending that. Like, he knows that he did it because he feels honor and solidarity to the capital. Again, his father died fighting for the capital. There's this patriotism in Snow that is not going to be erased. There's also this entitlement in Snow, but there's this deep patriotism to Snow that is not going to be erased overnight. And so that's more where his actions come from with Sejanus, more than it is like, I'm just gonna give him up because he's making me look bad and he's making me look some type of way. Like, it felt more like he felt Sejanus was making him look some type of way and didn't want to be associated with him. And if he got caught, he wanted something to back himself up in the movie, which is not his intentions in the book. So, I don't know. That relationship was kind of damaged for me. When it comes to his relationship with Lucy Gray coming back, it feels really one dimensional. It feels like they both have such a deep mistrust for each other. It's very interesting because when he comes back, that's like the only person Lucy Gray trusts. This is the person who's helped her survive the games. This is the person who put so much on the line for her. And so while they have a deep disagreement of views, like they don't see the world the same way still, they have really great conversations about it that are just kind of like completely erased in this. But I do think this is more realistic to where I would be. So I can't necessarily blame her or blame how the director played this, where he was like, this is just a trauma bond. And in the real world, they do not work because they have not grown up the same. And he's trying to differentiate her from the people around her. When in reality, even though she is different because she's a different person and everybody is different, she has gone through the plight of the others at District 12. So she understands and feels solidarity with them, even though Lucy Gray was chosen because her ex-boyfriend, which, like, ew, like, men? What is that? Like, that's awful. And her ex is awful. And her ex is probably the most accurately played character in this entire thing. Because he sucks. All stages of it, he sucks. There's no sympathy that I have for him in this whole thing. And when he dies, I was like, yeah, dude, you got. You played this dumb game and you won a dumb prize. Like, okay. At the end, I will say that the most accurate scene was the scene of Lucy Gray being like, yo, you're lying, you're doing something shady, and I'm not gonna let you kill me. When that snake jumped out under his mother's scarf and bit him, I screamed. I audibly screamed in the theater. I was like, oh my god, he just got bit. And it does look like she did it on purpose, which in the book, it's kind of insinuated that you don't know whether she did it on purpose or not, but it puts Snow in such a state of like, she's gonna kill me, that he feels that there is no other option but to get at her. So that whole scene was played great. I will say that my mom lost the subtlety of like Lucy Gray's song and what it meant and like her opera. So all of Lucy Gray's Covey um, family members are named after an opera, and hers specifically, like my mom didn't catch on to when her song came up. So I do wish they introduced that a little differently. I do understand why we don't get a lot of background on the Covey characters and we don't get this big friendship and relationship with them. That didn't really bother me, but it did bother me that some of the other more significant relationships in the stories were just kind of like passed over and glossed over. Um, but that end scene when their relationship falls apart was spot on. It was spot on. Alright, y'all, so I went really into some of the major things that I was feeling with this. I have to be honest that for me, on first viewing, this was like a 3 stars for me. Um, I need to kind of sit with it. I think I need to see it again to catch all of the details. Like I said, the pacing was really fast. Things just came and went and were done. The one thing I did appreciate about that end scene is that they took their time with it. They took their time with this like descent, with this not going wrong, with this falling apart of who they were. And I wish there were more moments like that in the rest of the story, more moments of real building up and suspense, because that's what the Hunger Game books really are all about, and that's what the story is all about. If it wasn't for the pacing issues, I really do think I would have scored this higher because it was a very entertaining movie, but it just didn't hit the same way as the book. And sounds awful, but I almost kind of wish this was a series or this was done in 2 parts, which of course can't happen in the opening of a movie. You wouldn't guarantee that people would see the second half. So I understand the direction that the director went with a lot of this, but it just really didn't hit the same for me. So I'm going to give it a 3 stars. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Tell me what your review was. What were your impressions of the movie on first watch? Are you gonna go see it again? I do definitely think I'm gonna go see it again. If anything, just for the music alone. Music was 5 out of 5. Like, say what you want about Rachel Zegler. That's her name, right? I think that's her name. That might not be her name. But the girl can sing and she can make you feel it. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I loved getting to review this whole series for you. I swear I'll put out my Hunger Games movie review. I might just leave it 2 hours long. Skip through what you want to see. Don't see other parts. But I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye, lectores.